You wake up in 1865. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not the sweet, warm smell of pancakes or coffee, but a heavy cocktail of mud, horse manure, and wood smoke, with a faint aftertaste of burned gunpowder that has been hanging around since the war ended. It's sticky hot, even though it's early morning, and you can already feel sweat trickling down your back like it's in a race to reach your belt. Your bed, if you can call a straw mattress with a burlap sheet a bed, has left you itchy. Your stomach is growling and you can't tell if it's from hunger or dread. This is the South. The Civil War is officially over. 4 years of carnage have ripped the country apart like an old shirt, and now someone's supposed to stitch it back together. Problem is, half the people don't even agree the shirt needs mending. The Confederacy? Gone. The Union? Technically whole again, but if you look closely you can still see the cracks, and they're deep enough to trip over. Oh, and that tall, soft-spoken president who promised malice toward none and charity for all? Yeah, Abraham Lincoln caught a bullet to the head at Ford's Theater. John Wilkes Booth got to play the worst kind of celebrity cameo in history, and now Andrew Johnson is president. A man who could start a fight in an empty room. You pull yourself up, brush the dust off your clothes, and step outside. The streets are quiet in that eerie, waiting kind of way. Houses look tired, some half-burned, others patched together with mismatched wood. You see ex-Confederate soldiers wandering around, still wearing ragged uniforms. They limp on canes or drag one leg behind them, faces pale from bad diets and worse memories. They glare at Union soldiers who haven't left yet. Blue coats gleaming in the sun, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. It's like someone left the war on pause instead of actually ending it. If you're black and newly freed, this is both the best and most terrifying time of your life. You're not property anymore. No one can legally sell you, whip you for working too slow, or split your family apart at an auction block. But freedom is kind of like being told you can leave a sinking ship without anyone giving you a lifeboat. You have no land, no money, and very few rights that white lawmakers are actually willing to protect. Sure, the 13th Amendment says slavery is over, but there's a whole swarm of people working hard to make sure your freedom still looks a lot like your old life. That is where the Freedmen Bureau comes in, a shiny new government agency with the thankless job of feeding, clothing, and educating freed people while also helping them find work. On paper, it sounds noble. In reality, it's like trying to put out a forest fire with a teacup of water while the neighbors throw matches at you. They're underfunded, understaffed, and despised by most white Southerners. Bureau agents are threatened, beaten, sometimes killed, and yet they're your best shot at getting any help at all. The political vibe? Imagine a family reunion where half the guests tried to kill the other half last year, and now everyone's pretending they can just move on. Congress is split between radical Republicans who want to punish the South and make sure freed people get full citizenship and Democrats, many of whom are busy figuring out clever ways to keep black people at the bottom without technically calling it slavery. Out in the countryside, local governments are already cooking up black codes, laws so restrictive they basically say, okay, you're free, but you can't leave your job, own certain property, or walk around without papers proving someone pays you. Everywhere you look, there's tension. Farmers need laborers, but they don't want to pay fair wages. Freedmen want schools, but building one might get it burned down overnight. Union soldiers are supposed to keep the peace, but they're outnumbered and often as prejudiced as the people they're policing. You see arguments breaking out in the street, sometimes ending in fists, sometimes in blood. The town square is where you really feel it. Merchants are hawking goods nobody can afford. A few preachers are out, waving Bibles and talking about forgiveness, though their audiences are mostly too tired or too angry to listen. Freedmen line up outside the Bureau's office for rations, a handful of cornmeal, maybe some salt pork if the supply wagons came through. White locals walk by muttering about lazy Negroes who want handouts, conveniently forgetting that until a few months ago, those same people worked for free their entire lives. If you're unlucky, you hear whispers about the Night Riders. They don't have a famous name yet, but they will soon. The Ku Klux Klan is just getting started. Men meet in secret, plotting how to restore order now that their old way of life is gone. They practice intimidation, burning crosses, riding masked through black neighborhoods, making sure everyone knows freedom has a price. And yet, there's hope. It's fragile, but it's there. In the evenings, you hear voices singing spirituals in the fields, the same songs sung in bondage, but now with a new edge of defiance. Freed people are getting married legally for the first time, naming their own children without an owner's approval, traveling to find lost relatives sold away years ago. Schools are starting up in church basements, with teachers using chalk and slates to teach the ABCs to kids and adults alike. The first black politicians are emerging, ready to fight for a voice in government, even as mobs threaten them. Still, you can't shake the feeling that you were living in a kind of in-between world. Not quite war, not quite peace, and definitely not justice. It's Reconstruction, and no one is quite sure what is being built or who it is being built for. You can see the outlines of two futures. One where the country actually keeps its promises, and another where those promises are quietly buried under piles of loopholes and hate. You watch the sun climbing higher, the heat pressing down harder. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer is pounding nails into a new roof, a sound that should mean progress, but instead feels like a warning. Because down here, rebuilding isn't just about houses, it's about who gets to call this place home. And you have no idea which way it's going to go. Work. That's the word on everyone's lips. Or maybe it's food, but either way, they're connected. You can't eat without working, and you can't work without someone deciding you're worth paying, which, in 1865, is not exactly guaranteed. If you're a newly freed person, you're discovering a fun little system called sharecropping. On paper, it sounds fair. You work a plot of land that belongs to some white landowner, you get to keep a share of the crops, and everyone wins. Except your share is whatever's left after the landowner deducts rent, the cost of seeds, tools, food, and any random fees he decides you owe. At the end of the season, you somehow owe him money. How? Math, Reconstruction style. It's like signing up for one of those free trial subscriptions that you forget to cancel, except instead of charging your credit card, they charge your life. And you can't leave because that debt, yeah, it follows you. Try to move to another farm, and suddenly you're breaking contract, which in some places can get you arrested. Guess what happens if you get arrested? Forced labor. Welcome back to slavery, just with more paperwork. If you're white and poor, the job market is no picnic either. Before the war, you could at least tell yourself you were better than enslaved people. Now you're competing with them for the same pitiful wages. Some of your neighbors are real mad about that. Mad enough to start joining secret societies that meet in barns and wear stupid-looking hoods. It's not a great sign for where things are headed. The work itself, back-breaking, filthy, and endless. If you're in the fields, it is dawn to dusk with your spine bent and your hands bleeding from pulling weeds and chopping cotton bolls. The sun feels like it's personally trying to kill you, and there's no shade unless you count ducking under your hat for 30 seconds. The smell is a mix of dirt, sweat, and whatever's rotting in the nearby ditch. If you're lucky enough to get a non-farm job, it's not much better. You could be hauling bricks for rebuilding projects, cleaning out privies for the town, or working as a servant in some half-burned mansion for a family that still thinks calling you by your first name is too familiar. Kitchens are hot, cramped, and smell like a stew of grease, wood smoke, and frustration. And don't even think about complaining. There is always someone else desperate enough to take your place. Contracts are another fun feature of your new life. If you can't read, and remember, the majority of freed people have been kept deliberately illiterate. You're signing a piece of paper you can understand. That paper might say you get paid in cash, or it might say you get paid in store credit at the landowner's shop where everything costs double the going rate. Either way, you're not getting rich. And then there's the constant, exhausting grind of proving your worth to people who still see you as property. Every day, someone's watching to see if you work hard enough to justify your wages. They're looking for reasons to call you lazy, ungrateful, or insolent, words that, in this time, can lead to being beaten, fired, or worse. Meanwhile, Reconstruction politicians are out there making speeches about the new Southern economy. They talk about progress and opportunity like it's raining jobs from the sky. You're standing there wondering where exactly these jobs are, because from where you're standing, all you see are endless rows of cotton and corn and the same old faces telling you where to stand and when to eat. The Freedmen's Bureau tries to help with labor contracts. Agents ride from town to town, encouraging fair wages and making sure deals are written down. But they're overworked, underfunded, and dealing with a white landowning class that resents them like they're tax collectors from hell. Half the time, by the time a bureau agent arrives to settle a dispute, the harvest is over and the damage is done. Food is another issue. You're burning thousands of calories in the fields, but your meals are mostly cornbread, molasses, and maybe some salted pork if you're lucky. Vegetables are seasonal luxuries, and coffee is a rare treat. Most of the time, your stomach is either growling or aching from eating too much gritty cornmeal. You dream about fried chicken, biscuits, and fresh peaches the way modern people dream about winning the lottery. Clothing? You wear the same shirt and trousers until they're practically transparent. Shoes are precious. If you have them, you patch them until the soles flap like tired mouths. Winters are brutal if you can't afford a coat, and summers mean swarms of mosquitoes big enough to carry off small children. And if you think you get to relax after work, think again. Your evenings are spent repairing tools, mending clothes, and trying to catch up on sleep before the rooster starts screaming again at dawn. Sundays might offer a break if you're part of a church, but even that can be tense. White vigilantes have been known to target black church gatherings, seeing them as hotbeds of rebellion. For women, the workload doubles. You're in the fields during the day, and then at home you're cooking, cleaning, and caring for children. If you're working as a domestic servant, you might also be dealing with your employer's wandering hands or their wife's jealousy. There's no HR department in 1865. Complaining can get you fired. Or worse, all of this comes with the constant hum of uncertainty. The war is over, but you don't know what next month will bring. Will the harvest be good? Will you get paid? Will a new law suddenly make your labor contract illegal, forcing you to renegotiate with someone who knows you're desperate? Some people leave, heading north in search of better opportunities. But the North isn't a promised land. Jobs are scarce there too, and racism travels just fine across state lines. If you stay, you gamble on things getting better. If you leave, you gamble on starting over in a strange place. Either way, it's a roll of the dice with your life on the line. This is what freedom looks like in the Reconstruction South, not chains and whips, but contracts, debts, and endless labor under the watchful eyes of people who'd be happier if nothing had changed at all. The war may have ended, but for most, the struggle has just changed shape. Every day you're surrounded by people, some you need, some you fear, and some you wish you could throw into the nearest river. It's like living in a very messy stage play where the cast is always changing, and nobody's sure who's supposed to be the hero. First, there's the Freedmen's Bureau agent. He's usually a wiry guy in a wrinkled uniform that's seen better days, smelling faintly of ink, dust, and desperation. His job description is long enough to wrap around the courthouse. Hand out food, settle labor disputes, start schools, reunite families, and somehow keep the peace between two groups of people who, let's be honest, don't really want peace. He's overworked, underpaid, and the target of every rumor in town. The white locals accuse him of stirring up trouble, while the freedmen accuse him of not doing enough. He looks like he hasn't had a good night's sleep since the war started, and he probably hasn't. Then there's the landowner, your boss, your landlord, your debt collector, and your occasional nightmare. He is usually a former Confederate officer or a wealthy planter whose assets took a hit during the war. He's bitter, polite only when it benefits him, and still clings to the idea that the old days were better. He'll tell you that sharecropping is mutually beneficial, and he'll even smile while explaining how the math works out, somehow always in his favor. The man could sell ice to an Eskimo as long as the Eskimo ends up owing him money. On the friendlier side, you've got your neighbors. If you're lucky, they're people you've known for years, maybe even fellow freedmen trying to carve out a life just like you. You share tools, watch each other's kids, and keep your ears open for trouble. At night, you might swap stories by the fire or sing old songs together, voices mixing in the warm dark. But there is always the possibility that your neighbor could be passing information to the wrong people, maybe for money, maybe out of fear. Trust is precious here, and you guard it like gold. And then there's the Union soldier who never went home. He's been stationed here to keep the peace, which mostly means drinking cheap whiskey in the evenings and telling anyone who will listen about the time he personally turned the tide at Gettysburg. He might be decent, breaking up fights, escorting you safely to town, or he might be another source of trouble, especially if he's looking to line his pockets or throw his weight around. You've learned to read the look in his eyes before deciding how close to stand. Of course, no Reconstruction-era cast would be complete without the local politician. He's usually a man with too much hair oil and too little conscience. You'll see him standing on the courthouse steps, making loud speeches about unity and progress while quietly working behind the scenes to pass laws that keep freedmen in their place. He smiles at you in public, but refuses to shake your hand in private. The man's words are like warm molasses, sweet going down but sticky enough to trap you if you're not careful. There are also new faces in town, northern teachers, missionaries, and entrepreneurs who've come down to help rebuild. Some are genuine, risking their lives to teach black children how to read or to set up businesses that treat freedmen fairly. Others are carpetbaggers, opportunists looking to make a quick fortune off Southern misery. They buy up property at dirt-cheap prices, flip it, and head back north with pockets full of profit. You can't always tell which is which until it's too late. But the most dangerous people you deal with aren't always out in the open. They meet in barns, wear white hoods, and call themselves defenders of Southern tradition. They're not famous yet, but the name Ku Klux Klan is already starting to spread in whispers. By day, they might be the farmer you wave to on the road, the shopkeeper who sells you nails, or the guy who tipped his hat at church. By night, they ride in groups, carrying torches and ropes, leaving behind burned homes and bodies as warnings. You don't need a wanted poster to know who they are. You can feel it in the way they look at you during the day. Even the people who aren't openly hostile can be exhausting. Every conversation is layered with tension. A white storekeeper might greet you politely, but watch you like a hawk the whole time you're in his shop. A freedman you've just met might ask too many questions about your work and your family, making you wonder if he's a friend or a spy. You've learned to talk in half sentences, to keep certain thoughts locked behind your teeth. Daily interactions are a constant balancing act. You have to be careful with your words around the landowner so you don't lose your contract. Careful with your body language around the politician so you're not accused of disrespect. Careful with your neighbors so you don't give away too much about what you own or where you keep it. Sometimes, though, you meet people who make it all feel worth it. Maybe it's a northern teacher who sneaks you extra pencils for your kids. Maybe it asks an elderly neighbor who remembers the old stories from Africa and tells them under the stars. Maybe it has the preacher who stands up in front of a mixed crowd and talks about justice like he actually means it. These moments are rare, but they're like sips of cool water in a dry season. They remind you that not everyone is here to break you down. Still, you can ignore the fact that the people around you are the ones shaping your life, for better or worse. The Freedmen's Bureau agent might save you from a crooked contract, but he could also pack up and leave tomorrow. The landowner might grudgingly pay you this month, but next month he might decide the market has changed and cut your wages in half. The neighbor who helped you repair your fence might turn around and warn the Klan about your new mule. It's not paranoia if it's justified, and here it's always justified. You've seen too many people blindsided by betrayal. You've heard too many stories about promises that turn to ash overnight. The faces you deal with every day are part of your survival, but they're also part of the danger. And the strangest part? You're becoming good at it. Reading people, memorizing small details, storing away bits of information like a squirrel hoarding acorns. You can tell when someone's lying by the way they shift their weight. You can guess who asks about to cheat you just by how they fold a piece of paper. It's a skill born from necessity, but it changes you. You start to see everyone as a possible threat until they prove otherwise. And even then, you never quite let your guard down. The war might be over, but the battlefield has just shifted. Now it's made of glances, handshakes, and contracts, and the enemy could be anyone you spoke to 5 minutes ago. You deal with them because you have to. You smile when it's smart, you stay silent when it's safer, and you pray that the ones you trust will still be standing beside you when the next storm rolls in. Night falls in the Reconstruction South like someone throwing a blanket over the world. It doesn't just get dark. It gets thick. The air feels heavier, sounds travel differently, and you start paying attention to things you ignored in daylight. Crickets stop chirping. Dogs go silent. Somewhere in the distance, a horse's hooves hit dirt in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You tell yourself it's nothing, but your gut doesn't believe you. You keep your lamp turned low. Too much light is an invitation, a signal that someone's home and worth visiting. Out here, visiting doesn't always mean bringing pie. Sometimes it means bringing rope, fire, or the kind of trouble that doesn't leave when you tell it to. You've heard the stories, the night riders, men in white hoods who slip through the darkness like a bad dream you'd wake up from. They're just starting to call themselves the Ku Klux Klan, and they believe Reconstruction is a disease that needs curing. You're on their list of symptoms. Your ears pick up more sounds, the clink of metal, the scrape of a boot heel. Your chest tightens. If you're lucky, it's just a group heading home late from a political meeting or a barn dance. If you're not, you're about to be reminded that the war didn't end for everyone. For some, it just changed uniforms. Even if the Klan doesn't come riding by, the darkness has its own threats. Laws don't protect you here, not when the men making the laws think you're the problem. The black codes give the sheriff the power to arrest you for vagrancy if you re-walking home from a friend-ass place without a labor pass. If you can pay the fine and you get hired out for public work, which is just slavery with a different label. Sometimes you wonder if the ink on the 13th Amendment even dried before someone found a loophole big enough to march you through. The night smells different, too. There's the usual mix of wood smoke and damp earth, but every now and then something acrid catches your nose. Kerosene. You know what that means? Somewhere someone's lighting torches and you pray they're just for walking in the dark. You remember the Johnson family down the road, how their new schoolhouse accidentally burned to the ground last month. Everyone knew it wasn't an accident. But knowing doesn't mean proving, and proving doesn't mean anyone will be punished. Your mind runs through the checklist you've learned by heart. Is the door barred, windows latched, tools brought inside, the mule secured in the shed so nobody can spook it? You don't have much, but what you do have is worth protecting, and not just from strangers. A neighbor's cousin could come creeping for a sack of grain if times are lean enough. Hunger makes thieves out of good people and killers out of bad ones. The wind picks up, carrying with it voices from the main road. You can't make out the words, but you hear the tone, loud, slurred, reckless. Drunk men in groups are never good news after dark. If they're soldiers still stationed here, they might just be blowing off steam. If they're locals, they could be heading to cause trouble, and you don't want to be the reason they decide to make a detour. You think about stepping outside just for a second to make sure the barn door is shut tight. But stepping outside at night is like stepping into a different world. The trees are just black shapes against a darker sky. The grass rustles in ways it doesn't during the day. Every shadow feels alive, and every sound feels closer than it probably is. Your heartbeat starts to sync with the far-off hoofbeats you're still hearing. In the distance, a dog barks once, sharp and urgent, then silence. That's worse than barking. Dogs don't stop for no reason. You blow out your lamp just in case. Sitting in the dark, you strain to hear over the rush of your own blood in your ears. There it is again. Hoofbeats. Closer now. You catch the faint flicker of light through the cracks in the shutters. Torches. You press yourself to the wall, barely breathing. Voices murmur, low but steady. The torchlight wavers, painting orange streaks across the dirt road. You can't see faces, but you can imagine them. Hard, set jaws under white cloth, eyes staring out through holes. One man laughs, a short, mean sound. The group slows, and you swear they're looking toward your house. This is the longest minute of your life. Then, just like that, they move on. The hoofbeats fade. The torchlight disappears around the bend. You don't relax, not yet. Sometimes they loop back around to catch you off guard. You wait until the night is still again before letting out the breath you've been holding. But the danger isn't always so obvious. Sometimes it comes in the form of a knock on the door at night, someone claiming to be a neighbor in need, or a deputy asking questions. Sometimes it's a letter slipped under the door with a crude drawing or a threat scrawled in charcoal. Sometimes it's just the sound of footsteps stopping outside your home, then walking away, as if to remind you they can come back whenever they please. You've learned to measure safety in hours, not days. If you get through one night without trouble, you count it as a win. The next night is another gamble. Even the natural world turns against you after sunset. Mosquitoes whine in your ears, bats swoop low over your head, and every now and then a copperhead snake decides to curl up near your porch, soaking in the last bit of heat from the boards. The darkness hides the danger, but it also hides you, and you cling to that small mercy. Still, there's something about night that sharpens your thoughts. You think about the people you've lost, the ones who didn't make it through this strange, fragile peace. You think about the future, if there even is one, and whether the world you trying to build will survive the people who want to burn it down. You also think about how unfair it is that freedom comes with so much fear. You fought to survive slavery, to outlast a war, only to find that the battle just changed shape. Now the weapons are laws, hoods, and shadows instead of chains and whips. Some nights, though, are quiet. No torches, no hoofbeats, just the distant croak of frogs and the occasional owl call. On those nights, you let yourself imagine a world where this fear is gone, where the only reason to look over your shoulder is to watch a friend catching up to walk beside you. But that's a dream for another time. For now, you sit in the dark, counting the minutes until sunrise. Because in Reconstruction, night doesn't just bring sleep. It brings the reminder that freedom isn't the same thing as safety. Morning comes, but it doesn't feel like victory. The sun peeks over the horizon, casting everything in gold, but you know better than to mistake that light for safety. Reconstruction isn't just about fixing buildings and roads, it's about deciding who gets to hold the power and who gets crushed underneath it. You walk into town, the dirt road crunching under your feet, and you see it everywhere. Freedmen lined up outside the courthouse waiting to register to vote under new laws. Some nervous, some proud. All of them aware that every white man glaring at them from across the street wishes they'd turn around and go home. Union soldiers stand nearby, rifles slung casually over their shoulders, but you can feel the tension rolling off them. They're not here forever. Everyone knows it. You overhear two shopkeepers talking. One says the country's finally getting back to normal. The other smirks and says, not until they learn their place again. They don't whisper. They don't need to. The word normal here is loaded, heavy with the weight of a time when normal meant chains and whips and auctions. You think about how quickly the war's promises have started to unravel. The 13th Amendment ended slavery, sure. The 14th is supposed to make freed people citizens. The 15th is supposed to give black men the vote. On paper, that's progress. But you've seen paper burn. You've seen laws written one year and gutted the next. You've seen equality dissolve into loopholes and new rules that smell a lot like the old ones. In the fields, the faces have changed, but the work hasn't. Sharecropping keeps families tied to the land the way chains once did, only now the shackle is dead. Schools pop up in churches and cabins, but every time one burns, you wonder if another will take its place. For every new right written into law, there's a backlash waiting in the shadows, eager to strip it away. You can't help thinking about the people who fought hardest for this change. Some are dead, buried in shallow graves on battlefields that no one visits anymore. Some are still fighting, running for office, starting schools, pushing for laws that might actually stick, but they're outnumbered. For every step forward, there's someone ready to shove you 2 steps back. It's not just the South either. You've heard stories from the North: riots, segregation, black workers being driven out of jobs by angry mobs. Freedom has borders on a map, but racism doesn't. It travels, it adapts, it survives, and yet there's a stubbornness in you. Maybe it's foolishness, maybe it's hope, but it's there. You've survived war, hunger, and nights where you weren't sure you'd see the morning. You've seen families torn apart and still found ways to put them back together. You've learned to read danger in the smallest signs, a tone of voice, a shadow across the road, and you've learned to keep going anyway. You think about the children in those new schools, the way their faces light up when they trace letters on a slate. You think about the freedmen casting their first votes, standing tall in line even while insults fly at their backs. You think about the preachers who keep talking about justice like it is something that can be built, brick by brick, even when half the town wants to tear it down. There's power in those moments. Not the kind of power that makes headlines or wins battles, but the kind that digs in quietly, like roots pushing through stone. It's not flashy. It's not immediate, but it's hard to kill. You also think about how this moment will be remembered, if it's remembered at all. 50 years from now, will they talk about Reconstruction as a success? A failure? Or will they skip it entirely, too messy to fit into the neat version of history they want to tell? People like neat stories. This isn't one of them. History loves to pretend that when the war ended, the fight was over, that everyone shook hands, rebuilt their houses, and lived happily ever after. But you know better. You've seen that the end of one kind of oppression can be the beginning of another, dressed up in legal language and polite smiles. You've seen how quickly the victors can grow tired of protecting the people they swore to defend. And maybe that's why it still matters, because this isn't just about the past. It's about patterns. The same tricks, the same excuses, the same insistence that now isn't the time for real change. It's about how easy it is for progress to stall when people decide the fight is over before it really is. You reach the edge of town and look back. The sun's higher now, lighting up the buildings and the people moving between them. From a distance, it almost looks peaceful. But you know the cracks are still there, running deep under the surface. You know the peace is fragile, held together with words that can be rewritten and promises that can be broken. You keep walking, because what else can you do? Stopping isn't an option. If you stop, the people who want the old days back will run right over you. So you keep moving one step after another, holding on to the scraps of progress like they reworth their weight in gold, because they are. You wonder what your grandchildren will inherit. Will they get a country that finally kept its word, or will they still be fighting the same battles you are now? Will they have to survive nights filled with hoofbeats and torchlight, or will those ghosts finally fade? You don't know. No one does. But you've lived long enough to understand that freedom is never given once and kept forever. It's something you have to hold on to, even when your hands are already full with work, debt, and fear. Especially then. The road stretches ahead, dusty and uneven. Somewhere out there are people who think this is all worth it. Worth the danger, the loss, the constant uphill climb. You're one of them, even if you don't always feel like it. Because giving up would be easier, but it would also mean letting the people who burned schools, who wrote under hoods, who wrote the laws to keep you down, win for good. So you walk. You watch, you keep going, and you carry this truth with you. Reconstruction didn't to fail because people didn't to care. It failed because the people who wanted it to fail worked harder, longer, and with fewer scruples than the people trying to make it succeed. That's the part they won't put in the history books. But you'll remember it. And now the question is, if you were here, in this mess, with everything on the line, would you survive it? Or would you just be another name, lost in the quiet between the hoofbeats?